Don't see it.
Okay, so I'm going to assume everybody's with me. So before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of the application, I want to give everyone a little bit of context about it. The city has 2 pots of money for this grant and 1 application. So the application is set up so that we decide which grant you're going to qualify for. The 2 pots are the Federal CARES Act Community Development Block Grant Funds, and that's a federal pot of money. And then we have state CARES Act funds. There's $200,000 of CARES Act money and $400,000 of CARES Act money. So these grants are $5,000 a piece. That's 120 grants that are available. It just gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're working with here. There are different eligibility criteria for each, but they were mostly the same. And since the amount of the grant was the same, we decided to combine 1 application so that you don't have to fill out the same application twice. So for our process, the city applied for the State CARES Act money when the first round got open. So we went in there and we applied right away. That was during October. And then we got notice of the grant award less than 2 weeks before we started accepting applications. And we started that on November 16th, last Monday. So that's all to say, thank you for working with us through this. Thank you for your patience. Government isn't known for being super speedy. So as we're trying to work quickly through this, there have been some bumps, and some of you have been really patient with us as we overcome that. We have a small staff and 1 very super dedicated IT person who has been working with us to help it get as smooth as possible for everyone. So let's get into the grant. The first part tells you what you can basically get money for. The $5,000 is a reimbursement for businesses, and they can be for any basically COVID-related expenses that you've experienced. That can be your rent or your mortgage, your utilities, if you had to purchase any PPE for your staff, or you have other unbudgeted COVID expenses, or even if you just need to support your payroll. You just have to provide us documentation of the expenses that you're seeking reimbursement for. We have some businesses that are ineligible for this grant. Keep in mind, this money comes from the federal government and the state government. So we have to make sure that we're following all those rules when we hand out these grants. So if you're a home-based business, if you have a home-based business and not a physical location that's separate, you're not eligible. Also nonprofits, if you're selling cannabis, private clubs, or if you are an employee of the city or someone in your immediate family as an employee or an elected official, those businesses are not eligible. So that's not everything, but you see the bullets on my screen. In terms of ranking the applications, like I said, we went through this pretty quickly. We wanted to be able to get money out the door as quickly as we could. And in fact, it's a requirement for the state money that we disperse funds before the end of January of 2021. So we needed to be able to get it out quickly, but we thought there's a lot going on. There's a lot of pressure for businesses right now, especially in the holiday season. We didn't want it to be a mad scramble to be like first in line. So instead, we decided to do a ranking of each of the applications based on the rubric that you see in front of you. There's a narrative portion, and that's 20%. Year-over-year revenue decline, cost of unbudgeted expenses. Your current business status is also evaluated. A lot of businesses have had to close their doors, especially our restaurants and bars. Currently, they're not able to have indoor service. We thought that was important to consider. We also wanted to make sure that our funds were reaching businesses that are typically disadvantaged when it comes to getting grant funds. So we have added extra consideration for minority or woman-owned businesses, number of years in business, and then receipt of other funding. One question I've received a couple of times is that if I've received other funding, can I still apply or will I be penalized? Yes, you can still apply. There is a 5% evaluation criteria for that receipt of other funding, but we just want to make sure that people who have had trouble accessing grants or loans so far are first in line for this program. It doesn't mean you won't get the grant. It's just one of the considerations. So we'll move down to our timeline and approval process. Like I said, we want to get this money out the door and into the hands of our businesses as soon as we can. We started receiving applications on November 16th. That window will be open until close of business on November 30th, I think 5 p.m. November 30th, that's next Monday. Then we're going to give ourselves 2 weeks to review applications, and we'll start announcing awards beginning December 14th and get those checks out as soon as we can. So that was a kind of big overview of the basics for the grant. Are there any questions about any of that right now? Val, is there anybody who wants to ask a question?
I don't see anyone currently that has their hand up. So we'll wait. Can we wait just a second to see if anyone has any questions?
Okay.
I have a question.
In the chat.
I have a question from Mr. Wanless.
Okay.
The question was, if the spouse is a city of employee, does that eliminate us from both of those loans?
Yeah, so if you're a business that is owned by either someone who is an elected official or a city employee, or a member of your immediate family is an elected official or a city employee, at this time you're not eligible.
For either loan.
For either of the programs, that's right.
Alrighty, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Any other questions before we move forward?
I don't see any yet. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of scroll down here. Before you get started with the application, there are some questions you may have. We tried to capture as many questions and answers as we could think of when we were building this process. So generally, these are things we've talked about already. This is a $5,000 grant. It's not a loan. You don't have to pay it back. It's $5,000. We're also not giving grants out on like a sliding scale. If you have a terrible situation, you get 5,000. If we think you're doing okay, you get less than that. It's 5,000. You either get the award or you don't. And then we talked about what the application process and timeline is. Two things I want to highlight in this section of the FAQs. Will telephone assistance be available? Yes. Yes. Please call the office. You're going to mostly talk to me, probably. So please call me, call our office. Any of the staff who answer the phones are happy to help you if they can. And if you have a more technical question, they'll forward you to me and I will answer your question. I'm available to help you get through this process. The other one is, can I save my application and come back to it? Unfortunately, no. You have to get everything in order and apply all at once. And the reason is because of that quick timeline that we talked about. We were building this portal as we were basically being told we had the funds. We had just 2 weeks to put it out there, and it's more complicated to have a system where you can log in, save it, come back to it later. We just couldn't get it done. So in the, we really wanted to get those funds out as quickly as possible. We didn't have time to build the more complicated system. Eligibility questions. One thing that seems to be tripping some people up is that your business has to have a physical location within the corporate limits of the city of Springfield. We can't be a home-based business. We already talked about that. You have to be in the city of Springfield. And one way you know that is, have you been paying property taxes to the city of Springfield? Then you're in the city. So you can check your tax bill. We also have a GIS map that I'll show you in just a minute where you can see if you're within the corporate limits. But like if you're in Jerome or you're in Leland Grove, you're not in Springfield. Here's other things. If you've received grants from other sources, and I think I've said this before already, but it's a common question. You can still apply for this grant. You just have to demonstrate that you have an ongoing need and you're not duplicating benefits. What do we mean by duplicating benefits? We mean you're not paying the same thing twice. So if you used a PPP loan early in the COVID crisis to pay for employee salaries. Let's say you subsidize salaries for April and May with your PPP loan, but you still had some salaries you're paying for in June, July, August that you need help with. You can claim those as your expenses to be reimbursed. So that's not a duplication of benefits. Let's see here. Down here is one I want to make sure everyone notices under application information. What will you need to submit the grant? And this here is a list of basically all the things that we're asking for and all the documents you're going to need. We tried to lay it out there for you. But if you have additional questions, again, please call me and we'll talk about it. Will your information be released? We're going to release the names of the businesses that received the grant. We're not going to release copies of your tax returns or any other confidential information, just whether you received the grant or not. And then here at the end, disbursement and documentation. What kind of documentation will you need to receive the funds? We're going to make sure that everything you uploaded in your application is accurate. And you're going to fill out what we call a vendor request form. Basically, you're going to be a vendor of the city of Springfield, so we can pay you this grant, and we're going to get a contract together for you. And then how long till I get my award? We're going to start making announcements on December 14th. And then basically it's about collecting that vendor request form and getting the contract signed. We hope to have the funds available for you pretty quick after that. And finally, do you need to submit additional documentation? Well, if you get one of our Cures Act grants from the state, as long as your application documentation is correct and everything is in place that we need at the time of your application, we're not going to come back to you for more information. If you get CARES Act funds, you're going to have to submit a documentation of income for yourself or for one of your employees, and we will be able to check that 6 months from the date of your award. That's one of the requirements of the CARES Act. So it's possible you will have to recertify an income limit 6 months from when you receive the award. All right, I think we are ready to get into the actual grant and get into the application, unless there are additional questions right now about the things we just went over.
We did have a question from Debbie Harper. She wanted to know, for the eligibility requirement of 50 employees, do you count 2 part-time employees as 1 full-time?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm sorry, I should have talked about that. What we're looking for is the number of W-2 employees, the number of employees that you have a W-2 for. I believe that is one of our frequently asked questions, but there are a lot of them. So let me see. Now that I look for it, I don't see it. For head count. So for head count right here, employee head count includes full-time and part-time employees for which the entity will issue a W-2. You do not need to include subcontractors. Okay, any other questions? No. All right, so we will move on. Right after we talked about at the beginning of the page, I hope nobody's getting dizzy from the scrolling, but right here at the top of the page, we go through the rubric, the timeline, and then you see this big green button that says, see if you qualify and access the application. So when you click that, it opens up this, I'm gonna keep that open just in case we need it later, but it opens up this page. And this page has our 5 qualifying questions. This tells us what direction to put to send your application, whether you qualify for the CARES Act funds or the Cures Act funds, or whether you qualify for both. You may qualify for both, in which case your application will be submitted to both. So the first thing we're talking about is your business within the city of Springfield's corporate limits? And we have a map right next to it that will pop open. where you can check your address and see if you're within the corporate limits or if you're in one of our holes in the donuts. So I'll just type in any address here. This is the municipal building. Let's see if it goes. So you can see that I'm in the blue, which means that I am in the city limits. Okay. So yes. And the next question is, select your organization type. Are you a for-profit or a nonprofit? Well, let's say I accidentally click nonprofit. Nonprofits are not eligible for this grant, but you could still give us your business name and your contact information. And we're keeping track of folks who weren't eligible in this round, but may be eligible if we get grant money in the future. We all know that this pandemic's not over. People are still experiencing losses from it, and we want to go after any grants that we can get to pass out to our community. So if we get other grants in the future, we want to make sure that people who are interested know about it. So this is where you can do that. But let's say you just did that by mistake. You're not a nonprofit, you're a for-profit. You can just close that out and go back and pick the right thing. And that's for any of these. Here's where we select, do you have 50 or fewer employees? Yes. This one, did you receive an award through the State of Illinois Business Interruption Grant Program? If you received a big grant, you are not eligible for the State of Illinois Cures Act funding. Remember, we have two pots of money. This is one of them where we decide, can you apply for a Cures Act or not? So I'm going to say no. And then you'll see below there, it says, based on your answers, your business is eligible to apply for CARES Act. But then we have one more question about the HUD guidelines. In order to qualify for CARES Act funding, you have to meet the income guidelines, either you as the business owner or one of your employees. And those are based on household size and the median income for Sangamon County. So we give you here how many people are in the household and what the annual income would be. So I'm going to say, just so that we can go through all the permutations of the application, that we do meet those income qualifiers. So based on that, based on my answers here, you can see that the application tells us we're eligible to apply for the CARES Act and we're eligible to apply for the Black Grant. And then all of the application fields are right here. And so you're applying for 2 grants, but with 1 application form. Val, I want to just pause here and see if anyone has any questions about that section.
I did see somebody with their hand up, but then they took it back down. So I don't know if you answered their question or it was Craig CK. Calgaroo, did you have a question, Craig? You just put your hand up again if you do, or you can speak. I guess you answered his question because it was up for a short time and then was down. So I think we're okay. I don't see any other hands up right now.
Okay, so the first section is pretty straightforward. It's just gathering information about you and your business. Your business name, your street address, and remember, we're looking for a location that's in the corporate limits of the city of Springfield. FEIN, right here, date of incorporation, and then date you started operations in Springfield. So maybe you incorporated somewhere else first, and then you moved to Springfield. We're just looking for the date that you started doing business in the city. And then this is the owner information. Right here, we're asking you for your email address. Make sure you're being careful with the email address. We're going to contact you via email throughout this process. So get your email in there correctly. You'll know when you hit submit because an email will come back to you that says you've successfully submitted your application. You should get that as soon as you hit the submit button. So just make sure that you're being careful entering your email address in there. If we scroll down a little bit more, type of business, what your industry is, and a summary of the goods or services that you provide. here's where we get into some more details. We're looking for the total operating expenses reported on the most recent year's submitted tax reform or submitted tax return. We're asking you for a number here, and then later we're going to ask you for the documentation to support that information. So don't put your tax return away. Keep it out because you're going to upload a copy. Then your net profit or loss, and we tell you where to find that. The number of employees you had on March 17th, and then the number of employees today. You're not going to be penalized if you have fewer employees today than you did on March 17th. A lot of that is just for our tracking purposes or trying to measure the impact to the businesses. So it's fine. I mean, it's not great if you had 20 employees and now you have 5. That's not what anybody wants, but it's fine to put that on your application and report that to the city. It's not going to negatively impact your score. Okay. Any questions about the application information? Nothing? Okay.
You must be doing a great job doing
good.
everything, Abby. So far, so good.
Then we're going to go.
You do have a question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Did not see that. I'm sorry. Thank you. It says, what if my company applied for BIG, but has yet to hear if we will be awarded?
Oh, I'm glad somebody asked that. So it's fine. Apply and you'll tell us that you applied and you have not received an award. At the city, we're also watching those BIG grant announcements. And so if you get an award from BIG later, let's say they announce you next month and you also have received our grant, you're probably going to want to take the BIG grant because they're giving out larger sums of money than $5,000 on a lot of those awards. So that's fine. And then we'll just take the grant we were going to give you and give it to the next person in line in terms of our ranking. Anything else there in the chat?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll go through now to the duplication of benefits. This is a requirement for both sources of funds. We are not able to duplicate benefits. So if you paid for your utility bill, for your power bill with the PPP in, I don't know, April, May, June, but you still have power expenses in July, August, September, October, you can apply for that grant, for this grant, and that's not a duplication of benefits. But you can't take this money that you get with this grant and apply it to expenses that you already received a grant for. So you can't pay for the same thing twice. What we've done is listed basically every grant or loan program that we could think of that was active during this time, so that you didn't have to kind of rack your brains and think of the right name. And you can just check the box, tell me when did you get the assistance and how much did you get, and if you still have an unmet need. So a lot of the common ones are in here from the state, from DCEO. The Paycheck Protection Program is listed, all spelled out here. Some people just call that the PPP. Another common one is EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loans. So we just tried to think of all of them that we could, but we can't think of everything. So if you got some other grant or loan and you didn't see it listed in our master list, just enter it there at the bottom in the other category. Tell us what it was, when you received the award, what the amount was, and if you still have a need. Okay. Just gonna take a breath. So I think that is it. I don't see anything in the chat. The next part is the scoring metrics. Like I said, this grant is not first come, first serve. This is where we're getting your score, part of where we're getting your score to rank all of the applications that are submitted. And then we'll give out funds until we run out of funds. So these are the questions that we talked about on that first page. You can look here. I'm going to switch to our first page on that we talked about, where you can see year-over-year revenue decline, cost of unbudgeted expenses, etc. And so you can see we're asking for those exact things here in the application. Now you tell me that you had whatever your percentage of year-over-year revenue decline is. The metrics, when you click this button, is going to automatically generate your score on the back end on the part I see. And then later you're going to upload documentation to support the score that you're generating here. So what I do is I look at the score you tell me you should get, and then I see what your documents say and make sure that those things match up. So I think that part is pretty straightforward. A minority or woman-owned business. I've had a couple questions about this. We are using the Small Business Association determination for whether you're minority-owned or woman-owned, and that's 51% or more ownership. That's what we're looking for there. Okay. Any questions about that first metric section? Questions 1 through 6 there?
No.
Okay.
You're
The next is the narrative portion of the application. We're not looking for you to write War and Peace, but we just want to give you an opportunity to share your story so that the folks who review these narrative portions and evaluate them and give points know about your business and what is the money for, basically. So we want to understand what's been the impact of this pandemic on your business. How have you been continuing operations during this year, and what are your recovery plans for when things, get back on track? So those are the 3 points we're asking you to address. And then the narrative portion is being sent out to independent reviewers. We're going to have the Mayor's Economic and Community Development Commission members review each of these narratives. This portion counts for 20% of your overall score. You do not have to be a poet or the next great novelist to tell a compelling story about your business. You know your business better than we do, so tell us about it. This is your chance to tell us about what's going on in your business and help us understand why you need the grant. You're limited to 500 words also, so don't get too wordy. You can write it out in bullet points. You can write paragraphs, whatever makes the most sense and is easiest for you. Any questions about the narrative portion of the application? No? Okay. The next section is about low income business owner or employee information. This section is only going to appear if you've qualified for the CARES Act Community Development Block Grant funds. So if you, based on your questions at the beginning, answers to your questions at the beginning, only apply to the CARES Act, if you're only eligible for CARES Act funds, you're not going to see this section. This section only pops up if you're eligible to apply for it. So this is where we say, is the business owner, does the business owner fit into these income guidelines? You can answer yes or no. If you answered yes, you're going to fill out the income certification form for yourself. If you answered no, you need to tell us about one position, one title at your company who does fit into these guidelines. And then you submit the income certification for either you or for that position, depending on your answer there.
Abby, where can I find that income certification form?
It's right here underneath this section. And we did have a comment that people would like to see it at the beginning. So I'm gonna ask our IT guy, Patrick, if he can also duplicate this form and put it on the grant landing page, that first page we looked at, so people have it ready if they need to. But it's right here. If you click it, it'll open up and tell you more description about how you fit into the low to mod category. This is based on median income for Sangamon County. It's specific to Sangamon County. And it gives you, again, the size of the household, income guidelines. And this is the form that you can click through, fill this out, save it, save this form to your desktop somewhere locally where you're going to be able to find it. And then you choose the file and upload it right from there. So again, this whole section will only pop up for you if you're eligible, if you answered at the beginning that you would be eligible for this funding source. Do we have any questions about the income certification section? I know this can be tricky for some people. No?
Not so far.
Okay, good. Maybe they can't hear me. Okay, next is the attachment section. So this is really just where we're telling you to provide the documentation for all the stuff that you've reported so far. The first thing is documentation for the expenses that you're submitting for the grant for. I said for a million times. Documentation of the expense for which the business is seeking reimbursement is the nicer way to say that. So if you're seeking reimbursement for your mortgage, for payroll, for PPE, you can tell me any of those things. You can tell me some combination of those things. It doesn't really matter. Whatever makes sense for you all. You just have to get to that $5,000 mark, and you can choose the files there, and you can see the directions. You can select multiple files for this because, of course, your lease is not going to be the same file as your payroll documents. So you're going to have to select more than one file. So you can select multiple files, press the shift key or the control key when you select your files. Next is the revenue statements. We asked for March to July 2019 and March to July 2020. We're just trying to get something consistent for all of our businesses. If that doesn't make sense for you, call me up, ask me about a substitute. I can work with you. Also, what does your revenue statement look like? I've talked to a lot of businesses who have different kinds of revenue statements. Each of your businesses is unique. You're going to have something that looks a little bit different for your business than it might for someone else's. It needs to make sense for you, and it needs to make sense to me when I see it. So if you have questions or you have a circumstance that doesn't make sense for you and you want to talk to me about it, please call me. Let's talk about it and we'll figure it out.
Someone had a question. Is the profit loss sheet okay to list the revenue and decline year over year?
Yes, that would be fine. Somebody told me they just had a shoebox full of receipts that they handed to their accountant at the end of the year. I do not want your shoebox full of receipts. Perhaps your accountant could make a statement for you. So I think that was the only example of somebody where I said, no, I will not accept a shoebox of receipts. So then your net profit or loss statement, and then your W-9. And we have a handy dandy button here where you can click it and fill out a W-9. And this is so that we can pay you as the grantee, should you be awarded the grant. So you can fill that out right here, save it locally to your desktop, and then upload that form. Oop, I lost my guy there. Okay. And then finally, we'll need a Secretary of State Certificate of Good Standing. You can get that at the Secretary of State's office if you don't have one. But that should be fairly easy for you to get. If you're a sole proprietor, you're not going to have a certificate of good standing. So just write a statement saying that you're a sole proprietor and you do not have a certificate of good standing and upload that. Again, we created this application portal pretty quickly, and so we weren't able to put in all the bells and whistles. So we either had to make this a required form or not a required form. We have to have you upload something. So a sole proprietor will not have this form. They just need to upload something saying that they're a sole proprietor. They don't have it.
Well,
right.
someone jumped in and asked a question, but I was going to when you took a breath here. Anyhow, about, not having to pay for the $25 for the Secretary of State certificate. Is there another way that can be done?
Yes, you're right. That's $25. You can get it online, and basically, I don't know if you take a screenshot of it before you pay for it, or you electronically download the file, but some version of that would be fine.
Right. Let's see. I think that was it.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I hope the message that you're getting as we're going through this application is that we are looking for ways to make this work for you. We want to give out all the money. My worst nightmare is that I'm not able to give out all $600,000, because I know there's $600,000 worth of need in the community, and we're all motivated to make this work for the businesses. So again, if you have questions or if something's not working for you, please call the office and we will figure it out.
Okay. Paul Layton wondered if the certificate of registration was equivalent to the form. I think that's a little bit different. I think that's the initial registration, and then there is a certificate of good standing.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the certificate of registration. I haven't seen one of those before. The good standing is really what we're looking for.
And Paul, if you have any questions, you can call the office and we'll help you get to that. Did you have any additional questions? I saw you did have your hand up. Go ahead, Paul, if you want to. Are you there, Paul? Okay, do we have any other questions? Either in the chat box or raise your hand. More than happy to take your questions.
Okay. Well, the last section of the application is just your certifications. Basically, you're going to go through, check all these boxes that everything you've told me in the application is accurate and truthful, and that you're going to use the grant funds for what you tell me you're using them for, and not to, go on vacation. That's really it. You can just read through those. You're going to certify that by typing your full name and dating it. Then you're going to click that you're not a robot and hit submit on the grant form. And you should get an email when you submit. You'll get an email to the email address you sent us before, just confirming that you've submitted an application. Okay, I think that is it.
Well, Abby, that was very thorough. I kept trying to think of questions that I know we've gotten, through this application process this last week, but I think you did a pretty good job of answering most of them. But there's always more questions and more things that we didn't think about. So if anybody has any questions, please raise your hand or put something in chat box. We'll stay on for a few more minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Abby?
That's really, that's it. I think we talked through all of it. I don't know what other questions I've received.
Okay.
You have another week to get your applications in. We will close the submission portal at 5 o'clock on November 30th. So, take the week if you need to get everything in. Call me, ask me any questions you have. And I know the office is closed on Thursday and Friday, but I know I'll probably be checking my email. So if you have questions, I'm going to still be responsive to those.
All right. Really appreciate everyone joining us this evening. Like Abby said up front, this has been an exciting adventure for us. We're excited to get this process in place so that if something like this were to come up again, we'll have the technology, we'll have the ability to get this done a lot quicker. Although, like she said, if it hadn't been for one AV person, day and night practically working on this would have taken much, much longer. So we're very appreciative of that. And I'm personally appreciative of Abby for taking the lead on this for us. So thanks everyone for attending, and give us a
Oh, I have
call
one
with any
more thing.
questions.
Keep your eyes open for the CWLP grant. They're going to be offering a grant for utilities. I believe they're going to start that the 1st of December, but definitely watch out for information about that utility grant. So I just wanted to let you all know that. I know there hasn't been a lot of assistance for utilities, but those are costs you still have. So I want to make sure everyone knows about that.
Yep.
You know?
Okay. Yeah, that's great. That's a great thing to remind everyone. Are there any questions?
No, I don't see anything in the Q&A.
Nope, and I don't. Here we go.
All right. Well, fantastic.
All right. Well, just remember, you can always call the Office of Planning and Economic Development. That number is 217-789-2377.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.